Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
It's wonderful to see each and every one of you. Please be seated.
Thank you.
I want to thank everyone. I'm not going to mention no names, but you know who you are, who have been calling on us this past week to check on us. We really appreciate it very much. And this is part of what God is calling us to do, is to be concerned for our brothers and sisters. So this portion has to be really understood. It's a little too loud in here, no? It has to be understood with a grain of salt, because you might miss it. This portion is called Emor, from Leviticus 21. The name of this parasha, Emor, means say, or speak, or declare. We're reminded about the laws of Shabbat. So this portion is very, very intense about relationships. Not only relationship between siblings, relationships with widows, relationships with virgins, relationships with about sacred and non-sacred. It's part of what makes holiness. The entire section is about God saying to Moshe to establish an Israelite universe of substance and of meaning. Regulations about fitness for the priesthood, fitness for sacrifice, sacred time, Shabbat, and God's seasons, the 3 seasons festivals, regulations about sacred places, the Mishkan, and sacred time, Shabbat. Why would an omnipotent God need to rest? As it says in Genesis, that God ended his work and he rested. I mean, that sounds so human, that God gets tired and is going through what we're going through. But there's a huge difference between a spirit God who creates by speech, and we have to create with our hands, by the sweat of our brow. So what is the metaphor here about God resting? My conclusion is that the rest is implying about pausing. God creates and he pauses before he creates the next thing. And we learn this from the 6 days of the week. He begins with, let there be light. And you may think, well, he rested after that. Well, yeah, you can use that, but the reality is God never gets tired. He never has to sleep. He never slumbers. He never takes a siesta. He doesn't need his vitamins to sustain him. He's never on a diet. He is wind. So the only pause, the only rest that makes any kind of sense is God is pausing from creation to another creation. And I think it'll make more sense as we go further. Leviticus 24 and verse 11. The man who uttered the blasphemy is an unsayer. It is the opposite of Emor, of speech. His mother is the daughter of Divri, from Davar, or speak, or utter. Emor can mean that this is concerning the speaker. Well, the ultimate speaker, obviously, is God, who began to create, first of all, his son. He spoke his son to existence by Emor, by speech. To blaspheme is to abuse language. Now, you've heard me say this many a times. I don't know if you understand or if you don't want to understand. Maybe it's so difficult for you, but I've been saying this for many, many years. Abuse language, something that you're familiar with. He goes, she goes. Well, where are they going? Instead of he spoke or she said, something of substance. It is no different than what I have been teaching for over 60 years. Any word of laziness or altering words of substance are unsaying, eroding the building blocks with which God created speech, including heaven and earth, and the universe is created from Emor. Today, more and more people sound like the Shlomit woman, the daughter of Dibri, from the tribe of Dan. Dan, of course, in Hebrew means the judge. They corrupt the language, not realizing that all of creation is a result of speech, Emor. God spoke and things came to be. When we are stubborn and refuse to correct our speech and our children's speech, we become part of those who make holes in the gift of speech. I was like, and she was like. I go, she goes. He's cool, and she's hot. I spend a ton of time with them. This is what people use this language, making holes in the gift of speech, realizing that we are the only subject, we're the only created being that use speech as God is. And the closest thing to God is the king. The king has the power to kill with words. He has the power to put bondage or to release. Only with his speech. He doesn't have to use anything. But this is the signet of a king. What does it mean in ancient Israel to blaspheme? You would really be hard pressed to find it, because it's only found in one book, in one chapter in the whole Bible. And for those of you who take notes, it's Nun, Kuf, and Vet. Nun, Kuf, and V. It's called Nakav. Nakav. Which means piercing. Piercing. Like making holes, similar to the ones they bore in Yeshua's hands and feet. It suggests that cursing God is an act of violence. The name Yod-Heh Vav-Heh. I love listening to Mashem Shalom, Shalom Shachor. I love to listen to Terence's prayer because it's almost like he understands the Haya, the Hoveh, and the most important one is Yavo. See, there's no other prayer, there's no other name that reflects on what Yeshua is going to do. He is coming back, Yavo. There's no prayer like it in any language. And it represents the what is acronym? It represents the acronym where people have forced a hole in God's speech by calling it Yahweh, Yahweh, Jehovah. All these are boring holes in the name or in the character of God, because Yod-Heh Vav-Heh is not a name, okay? It is an acronym, which represents what Brother Terence has been praying for the longest time, Haya. That's what Yod-Heh Vav-Heh is, Haya. He was, he is, and he what? Not will be, not will be, huh? Return. He's coming. Yavo. And there's no language, there's no other prayer that makes more sense about the Yod-Heh Vav-Heh. It is not a name. Yet the Christians are going to teach the Jewish people about what Yod-Heh Vav-Heh represents. And they will force it into Jehovah, Yahweh. If the Hebrew people that received the oracles of God face to face do not dare to pronounce the Yod-Heh Vav-Heh, the Christians, oh, well, God told us, God showed us, He unveiled to us. No, He did not. You're blind, and you're leading the people to blindness. Yod-Heh Vav-Heh derived from the verb to be, or the one who is, or the one who will be, or will come. Being or becoming from Exodus 3 verse 14, Haya, Hoveh, Ve Yavo. This is the biggest one we look and we strive for Yeshua to return. In ancient Israel, as in many cultures, the name was part of the reality it represented. For this reason, the blasphemer who tears hole in the divine name tears a hole in the integrity of all that exists, all that the one who is being called into being. So when you blaspheme, you actually bore holes into yourself also, because you're part of Emor. You're part of the sayings of God. The blasphemer who insults God must be punished with piercing death in the form of stones. You see, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. God's perfect judgment. If you're very rich and you take life, you can pay your way out with a good, powerful lawyer, a team of lawyers that they can take you out of the punishment. But that's not an eye for an eye. Or if the judge will give you, 5 years for taking life, 3 months maybe for taking an eye. That's not equality. But everything in God is perfect balance, an eye for an eye. You go in a fight, you're being violent, you propose to take the person's eye out. When you consider, when the judge gets a hold of you, guess what? He is going to take your eye out. You're going to be thinking hard about what you want to do, because you're going to feel the same response. And so what is happening here? The blasphemer, he poked holes in the integrity of God. What is the punishment? Hanging? Crucifying? No. You made holes, the community will take stones and put holes on you. An eye for an eye. Interesting term is used for pronouncing the name. Nokev, Shem Adonai. The Hebrew root, nun kuf vet, nakav, generally means to pierce or to bore, a hole in something. But Leviticus gives you another, it's the only one in all of the books. Leviticus 24 is the place where in the Bible where is the root is used here to curse, to poke holes into the integrity of God, is used by making holes. We conclude that as sons of the Most High God, our duty is not to curse God by making holes in his integrity, denting or questioning God's commands or his plan, but to bless Adonai 3 times a day, to tell him how great and mighty he really is, to thank him for choosing us even before we were born. So you are very talented and you build a beautiful bridge and you're proud of it. You build a skyscraper, 70, 100 stories up, and you brag about it. But then you go, how tall is that skyscraper? Maybe 1,000 feet, maybe more. I'm talking about feet. You go to one of God's skyscrapers, we're talking about miles. 5.5 miles, like Everest or the Himalayan chain of mountains. These are not feet, these are miles. Does anybody brag about those? No. You want to talk to everybody about what you did. And God is laughing at you because you measure by inches and feet. He measures by miles. But that's not enough. When you consider that some of those clouds are multi-tons, literally tons, I can use that because it's weight. Where do you think floods come from? Clouds. They bear billions of pounds of water, and they can drown cities and streets. Where do these clouds come from? Yeah, some of them are very high, very high. Did you ever consider what keeps them afloat? Take a glass of water and pour it, and it's not going to go up. It's going to go down. Take a rock, throw it up, it's going to hit you in the head. And yet God has performed a way to take this multi-tons of water and suspend it in the air. And it's not until God tells the clouds to go ahead and rain down. I've seen those black clouds. It just passed by. I think they were so full, they could have put right there in my property. No, going to go down to somebody else. On the Torah's calendar, this month is the month of Iyar. Iyar is the month of enlightenment. It falls between the great month of redemption called Nisan. It was doing fine until somebody touched it. So we have a month of enlightenment and a month of revelation, Sivan. And it's regarded as a month of passage to prepare us for the revelation that God gave Israel and the mixed multitude in Mount Sinai. The mountain, one of them is called Mount Horeb, the mountain of destruction. But there's another name, and it's the name of Sinai, from a plant or a tree, a bush called sneh. And what we find here is a metaphoric view of the burning bush that never was never consumed. It probably burns with mighty fire, but does not emit heat. It's the kind of a heat that we are not familiar with. It is God's fire. The same fire that he used on the sons of Aaron. Nothing was scorched. Nothing of their clothes were burnt, but yet the fire of God killed them. So here we are. God is calling on Moshe, come near. Because he was looking at these fires. I've seen fires many times in the wilderness, and they do. Some of these rocks can reflect and they'll start fire because all the vegetation there is very flammable. It's like gas. And all it takes is a spark in the wilderness, and then you have fires. He's familiar with that, but he's never seen a fire that was not consuming the bush. That bush is called sneh. And God wanted to give it a name because the sneh represents life. On the flip side, when people do not adhere to God's commandments and make up their own commandments and their own religion, then mountain is called Mount Horeb, the mountain of destruction. So here we have a mountain that could represent life, or a mountain that can represent destruction. And that's what happened in the two temples of Israel. They produced life. We find that King Shlomo built a house for God. And he also found a room for the Ark of the Covenant in a special, all alone, in the Holy of Holies. And notice there was no seating arrangement. There was no furniture of any kind. There was no electricity. There's no water. It stands alone. And yet, if it stands alone, what is the big deal? Why do you have to put guards? Well, he put the two cherubim, the two sword bearers, the very same two that protected the Garden of Eden with their fiery swords. Something you can find in the Hollywood movies where they have those fiery swords. Well, where they come from? They come from the story of Bereshit. And the same two Kruvim are the ones who met with Abraham after the circumcision. Here we are again. They're the protectors of Yeshua as he came to visit his friend Abraham. And then we find that the same two are found in the book of John when he was in his grave, and there was two mighty angels, one at the foot, one at the head. It seems like those two are always accompanying Yeshua. What is the purpose of celebrating birthdays? What do we anticipate? What is it about birthday? You really think that because you're going to be 70 or 80 years old now? What you're looking forward is to gifts. You want to be rewarded that you made it to 70 or 71 or 72. I could care less about my age. What do you have for me? That's how I celebrate it. Gifts. This Israel's birthday, they made it out of darkness. Egypt represents darkness. Like we have sunrise in Jerusalem, and then we have sunset. That is darkness. And Jerusalem represents the place of light, and Egypt represents the place of darkness, sunset. So what did God give Israel for their birthday? Well, he didn't promise them any villas or private jets or yachts. Freedom, deliverance. That was the biggest gift he provided for them. And then he said, if you like freedom and you want to continue in freedom, let me give you the manual for life. And I'll give you the oracles. And I'll give them to you not in the newsstand or a bookstore, TV, or evangelist. I will give it to you face to face. So there's no doubt. There's no doubt that this is who I am and what I am giving you because I love you. And then, if you do that and you walk in my precepts, then I'll consider marrying you. You'll be my bride. Now, for those of you who have been in Jewish weddings, you know something that really stands out. It's called the ketubah. Did you ever get one?
Yes, we signed it here.
Okay. I've had
You'll remember it.
much water under the bridge.
I'll show you.
Yeah. So ketubah, the very word represents ketubah is the writings. And they only belong to the bride, not to the groom. The groom is the one who writes it and proposes it. Well, did you hear what I said? The groom writes it. The groom is the one who gave us the oracles. Now it's up to the bride to practice it. And what the writings that the woman has and cherishes it and puts it at the front of the house. So when visitors or family come, it'll be one of the very first things that they notice is the ketubah. Beautiful, ornate, one of the best looking paperwork that the rabbis have ever done. I could never match that. Beautiful calligraphy. Is that what it's called? Calligraphy. Yeah. And it's honorable to the bride. And she wears it, even though it's on the wall, she wears it with pride and joy. This is what my husband did for me. And the words, I like no other words. He cherishes who I am. And not only that, but he gives me a huge price in the event of divorce. If he divorces me, this is the sum that he's going to give me. Well, if you read the story of Yeshua and what he did for us, he wrote the oracles for us. And then he gave us a price, not the price of a slave, not the price of a groom, but the price of a bride. 30 pieces of silver. Why not gold? Because gold was really not much of a commodity. It was not, gold was more represented about things like the menorah, the Ark of the Covenant, that really belong more to God. The silver was not only a monetary exchange, but also medicinal. So many times when the Philistines have poured poison in the wells, then the Levites would take silver coins, and they were pure silver, 999, and they would throw it in the water, and in a short time the poison was eliminated. If you notice, in x-rays, it's not gold, but they have silver, a silver line. I don't know about the dollars. I remember back in the maybe 40, 50 years ago, you could look at monetary in the different dollars bills, and there was always a silver cord. And actually, when the Bible describes our heart and our spine, the spine is called what? Silver cord. The silver cord. If the silver cord is not broken, so it represents, of course, life eternal. A proposal to be God's only begotten bride of all the world's population. This sounds almost ridiculous. Who cares about a proposal? Give me substance. Give me gifts. Give me expensive toys. But what do we not consider is that God has given us a gift that no man can take and no man can give. We were in bondage. That's what sin is all about. We folks are in bondage, literally. And no matter how strong you think you are, there's always temptation. Even though sometimes I brag to myself about not drinking, not smoking, not doing tattoos, not doing drugs, but I find myself, yes, I'm like everybody else. I get angry and I want to kill somebody. Of course, metaphorically. I'm so, just get out of my way. Stop putting your lipstick while you're driving. Don't put your hose. What is it called? Hose? Huh? Pantyhose. Well, I've seen that. They go about 5-10 miles an hour putting their pantyhose while they're driving. Just pull over. Dan, I know you don't get upset, but Emor has to do with etiquette, of civility, a profound distinction between the animals and humans, specific restrictions like no other is for the Kohanim, and especially for the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, regarding the dead, regarding what kind of wife they can have. They cannot have a widow. They cannot have a divorcee. They cannot have a non-virgin. They cannot have one from any of the tribes of Israel, for sure not of the pagan world. They must marry into the Levitical tribe, the tribe of Levy. In the old days, and in some cultures even till today, women must produce evidence of their virginity. If you go to a Muslim wedding, you will see, while the Muslim world did not receive a Torah from God, it was the Hebrew people, the people of God, who received the oracles, the condition. But in Islam, they have to produce in front of 3 or more elders to produce the blood. It is the evidence of their virginity. And of course, virginity speaks of pureness and cleanliness, loyalty to the one who deserves it. Today, a virgin in modern society, it's almost like laughable. From the very early on, they're asked, "Are you still a virgin?" "Yeah, I'm 9 years old." Well, you're not having fun like we do. Leviticus 22, verse 27. Synagogues around the world begin reading in Leviticus 22. It's about the holy days that's coming up. While on any given Sunday, one can walk into any church in America, yes, including if it's Baptist, First Baptist, Second Baptist, Third Baptist, Catholic churches all across, none of them have a uniform of teaching. They all have to come up with their own style. Only in Judaism, it is uniform around the world. No matter what language, what country, you go to any synagogue and you know what the Torah portion is. It is uniformed. That makes a big sense, because what is a portion? God's portion is about a pleasant aroma that goes to his nostrils. Around the globe, 24 hours a day, there is somebody teaching about the Torah portion on that day. What's in Jerusalem? We know that Dallas is exactly the, what is it called? The circumference of the globe. The globe. The sun and the temperatures are exactly in Tel Aviv as they're in Dallas. I don't know what this is called, but some of you know English. Huh? Equinox. I'm not trying to find the word in that is.
The equator?
What is it?
Longitude line.
Okay, longitude. Yeah, it's the same in Tel Aviv as is in Dallas. So temperatures are very, very similar. It appears to be a strange place to start the holy days as we read it. If we connect the first sacrifice in the garden after the first sin, and when connecting the sacrifice of Cain, the story of Cain and Abel, a pattern emerges. The pattern is not about the event at all. It is about the cause and the reason for sacrifice, even in the first place. While the sacrifice began in the garden by Yeshua himself, fulfilling the role of the high priest and sacrificing the first animal, ultimately, it is Yeshua himself who becomes in the form of a lamb, the acceptable sacrifice for mankind. Any person can sacrifice his son, but will not qualify to forgive sin to the world. Only Yeshua, the Son of God, the Lamb of God, was acknowledged and accepted for the sin of all people, regardless of what and where you come from. If you walk in his footsteps, your sacrifice is forgiven. Leviticus 22, verse 27. When a calf, a lamb, or a goat is born, it is to remain with its mother for 7 days. From the 8th day on, it will be acceptable as food offering and presented to the Lord. In the laws of do's and don'ts for the holy days, we find a connection and a pattern of numbers. And it appears each of the holiday has things that stand out. 1 and 7. 1 and 7. The first thing that Yeshua created was, let there be light. That is light, that is enlightenment, that is life. And the 7th day is one of rest, one of, metaphorically speaking, that you have to have the light to be able to go through all the other 6 days of the week in order to arrive to your resting place. And folks, we're not going to find eternity unless we have to use the light that Yeshua gave us through his Torah. Torah, among other things, is not only to point, but also to lead and to show and to teach. People think that the Torah means only those 5 books of Bereshit. No, the Torah to a rabbi means a lot more. It may tell you that your hair is too long or too short, that your dress is too revealing. This Torah is about holiness, that the rabbi must teach holiness towards God. Because God says, I am holy. Therefore, you need to be holy. So I'm gonna bore you for a little bit here now. I'm gonna show you some steps about the 1st and the 7th day. The pattern goes that all of God's holy days are 7 and 1. It all started with Genesis 1, and there is a beginning, but the beginning does not start with a word. It starts with a number like this, 1. You would think that it would be called, like in America or other place, Sunday. Has nothing to do with the sun. It talks about numbers. Why is numbers important? Because whether it's your age or whatever number that you want to produce, it's temporary. It's temporary. Only names will last for eternity. So remember, this whole week of creation begins with 1st day, 2nd day, 3rd day. The Catholics have come and changed that to Sunday, Monday, giving all these celestial bodies to be honored with a day of creation. But this is not what Yeshua wanted. He wanted all the days of work, which are going to be temporary, to be wiped out. The only number that will last through eternity is Shabbat, the 7th day. This is God's 7th day. They both have pretty much a resemblance of 7, very similar to 1. Both of them have stroke and a horizontal and a vertical strokes. They represent rest. Rest. You can go from up and an elevation of Torah, and you get to rest. So, it starts with the number Echad and ends with Sheva. Sheva is not only 7, Sheva also means satisfaction. Sheva is the root word for Shvuah, which is the pattern of swearing. As Yeshua tells us in Isaiah, that he swears by his own name. There's nothing in heaven or earth can be a more powerful swearing. And the swearing here is different than what we swear. We swear and we want to inflict pain on our fellow person. But in Yeshua's swearing is about, you can take my word for it. I am a doer. I don't make promises that are vain. When I tell you something, you can bank on it. If I tell you that I'm coming back, I'm coming back. When I tell you that I love you so much that I will sacrifice my own self so you can live. And that's what he did. He sacrificed himself. It's not so much the piercing on his hands and feet. It was the abusive language that he was called. As the people, the Jews and the Romans and the barbarians, they poke holes in the integrity of the God of the universe. So he gives them Echad and he gives them Sheva. Work began on the first and ended on the seventh day. We find an emphasis on these two numbers. And you will find them, as I will show you some of it, that the whole basis of a strong foundation is based on 1 and 7, light and rest. Or as the Levite would have the tablets of Turim vetumim, Urim vetumim, lights and Shabbat, perfection. You have no perfection. You cannot perfect anything as long as you're in the number 2 or number 3. No, perfection comes at the end when you get to, I get to rest. I get to take the weight out of my feet. Leviticus 23, verse 3. The Shabbat falls on the number 7. Leviticus 23, verse 5. Pesach falls on the first month of the 14th day of the month. So we find a multiple of 7s. One Pesach is over Adam. The second Pesach is the second Adam, which is Yeshua. 7, who is or represents, is the time of rest, Shabbat. One day later, on the 15th of the month, is another holy day, the Feast of Matzot. For how long? 7 days. Did anything happen on the first day? Well, verse 7 tells us, yes, it is a holy assembly. Verse 8, offerings for 7 days. Leviticus 23:15. We count 7 weeks called Shavuot, or in the Latin, Pentecost. Leviticus 23, verse 24. On the 7th month, on the first day of the month, Rosh Hashanah. But that is not the name in the Torah. It is not called Rosh Hashanah. It is called Shabbaton. Shabbaton, a Sabbath, a proclamation with a shofar, a holy assembly. Pesach, Shavuot, and Rosh Hashanah, when analyzing the pattern of 1 and 7, we find they are repetitious of the original first week of God's creation, a pattern that complements the very Shabbat. We learn the first of creation is light. Yeshua, the light, and the seventh, he is our Shabbat, he is our rest. Back to where we started in Leviticus 22 and verse 27. Bull, ram, goat shall be with his mother for how long? 7 days. Thank you. Somebody is here is listening. And on the first day, after the 7 days are complete, they can slaughter the animal again on the number 7 and the number 1. From the above, we learn how important the number 7 is. There is 7 times when a bride goes around the groom and the Mishkan. There is 7 days for a child to sit shiva, to sit in the ground at the loss of a loved one, mainly parents. They sit, they eat, and they sleep on the floor to represent ultimate honor, ultimate cycle of life and death. A week is represented by 7 days. Wedding, life, 7 circles. A loved one, parents. We sit in the ground in a sign of mourning. No radio, no TV, no writing, no reading, nothing. You just sit still and remember the time you had with your loved one. I often say to people, I don't want you sending me flowers when I die. If you're going to send me flowers, do it when I'm alive, when I can smell them, when I can see them. Why do we always send gifts to people who have perished? They can't smell, they can't see. In fact, in Israel, they don't give flowers. They used to. They give now stones. Stones. Because stone will endure for the eternity of this planet. And they want you, the person, well, not you, but the person, the loved one who passed, that as long as the stone is present, your memory will stay with me. From the above, we can learn how important the number 7 is to God. We find that even though God could have created the universe in 1 day, in 1 millisecond, but he chooses to create it on the 7th. And yes, 7 is a big part of creation itself. I wish I had the time, but I can show you on the screen how 7s appear in all types of scientific inventions and in creation itself. Even in plants, scientists were able to find that 7s appear in all of creation. Maybe for another time. From the above, we learn how important the number 7 is to God, including the creation of man and a woman. We conclude that the number 7 becomes the pivotal benchmark the center of the universe, whereby the universe itself is rotating around the number 7 and not around a galaxy. While many galaxies have their own orbit, yet all of the galaxies and the universe itself rotate around the Shabbat. Shabbat. Leviticus 22:31-32. Keep my commandments and follow them. I am the Lord. Do not profane my holy name, for I must be acknowledged as holy by the Israelites. I am the Lord who made you holy. The Bible refers to the tabernacle as the Ohel Moed. Ohel Moed, tent of meeting, tent of sacred events. The word Moed refers to an appointed time and appointed place. The tabernacle was God's appointed place to meet with man at these appointed times. Leviticus 23 presents a list of God's appointed times called Moadim. They are the holy days which he, God, appointed to meet with his people, Israel, and all who wish to join his covenant. God is holy. His tabernacle is holy. The events are holy. Who are going to be the guests? He's not going to invite drunkard, drug people, violent people. No. If everything about God and his location and the event is holy, he is inviting holy people. Matthew 22, verse 1-14. Yeshua tells the story of how a certain king was giving a wedding feast for his son. He sent out his servants to call those who had been invited to the wedding feast. The servants had to declare the appointed time and the appointed place of where the banquet was going to take place. As God summoned Israel to appear before him at Mount Sinai, an elevated place, so everyone could see and testify, unlike Joseph Smith and Muhammad and Buddha, who met their subjects in the woods, in the forest, where nobody could see or hear, when they say, well, I was in the forest and an angel from heaven came and told me to write the Book of Mormons, or the book of Islam, the Quran, or other religions have come up with theirs. Israel is the only nation on earth who you didn't have to tell them. All 3.5 millions were present when God declared his majestic sight and his thunderous voice. My father and Sandy love the thunder. I don't. It kind of, I'm not ready for it. It kind of scares me a little. But they love it. To them, it was like God speaks to us. Well, that's okay, God, but don't be too loud because it scares me. Yeah, so in Matthew 22, Yeshua is making a statement here about a wedding taking place. And he tells them about the time and the appointed place for the banquet. As God summoned Israel to appear before him at Mount Sinai. And it was only at that time that all Israel, all unanimously, including the mixed multitude, they all spoke in one accord. And the prayer was, Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do, and then we will hear. Well, we know that this is not what's taking place today. Israel is not doing, and Israel is not listening. Instead, right on Friday before Shabbat, and right after the Feast of Tabernacles, they went out to an engagement of a big party of hundreds of people showed up from pretty much Europe and America, including the Israelites, who did drugs, who exposed themselves, who flaunted their skin, who put a 5-meter Buddha. What's wrong with this picture? God tells them up front, I am a jealous God. If my wife knows that I'm a jealous husband and she begins to flaunt with other men, somebody's going to get hurt. Well, in this case, the husband of Israel, they got hurt. Thousands of people were taken to Hamas. Thousands were killed. Thousands have been hurt. I don't hear them repentance. There's no repentance. So what I'm afraid of is it's going to come back and it's going to be worse. It's going to be worse. God has warned the Jewish people for 1,500 years. He sent the prophets to them. He said, thus says the Lord, don't be like other nations. You're holy people. Get out of here. Isaiah, you come to us one more time, we're gonna kill you. And they did. They sewed him into pieces. Even have the nerve, the audacity to do come on, Doc. What did they do before surgery? Anesthesia. Didn't even give him anesthesia. The man was wide awake, felt every little pain. And God said another one. And he said another one. And at the end he says, okay, maybe if I send my son, they'll come and say, this is my son. Hey, this is not just another prophet. This is my son. And he went, oh yeah, we'll kill you too. And that's it. Right after that, God says, you punish my son, I'll punish you. Destroy their home, destroy their land, and then put them in the four corners of the earth. For what reason? To tell the story. But did they tell the story? No. Hey, these Gentiles are not very smart. Let's make some money. So they went into the banking business, in the real estate business. So he found another person to punish them with. In this case, his name was Hitler. He put Hitler there for 7 years to punish the people of Israel, who instead of teaching the nations about God and godliness, the Torah, they wanted to become rich. He said, okay. He sent Hitler, and Hitler took all their wealth and all their real estate and all their homes and all the money they had. There's a story about this Nazi who was, I don't know what's a good word for picking or choosing. There's a very nice English word that I need to use it sometime. Can't remember it now. But he would go and he would come to all the very, very wealthy Jewish women. And he would say, listen, I'm a Nazi, but I have an order from Hitler to kill you. But I don't want to kill you. I want to help you. Now, Hitler's going to take all your money and everything. But if you tell me where your wealth is, I'll take it and I'll keep it for you until the war is over. Because see, if you kill them, like many went to the Holocaust, they wouldn't always tell you where the wealth is. They had it in different places. But now they go there in trust. They trusted this Nazi guy. He was one of the wealthiest Nazis in all of Europe because he went to the very big money and they totally trusted him with everything that they had. And then he puts them on the train and he takes all the stuff for himself, not even for Hitler. So why did Yeshua give a specific appointed time and appointed place? Well, the time, of course, is the giving of the Torah, the giving of the oracles of God. And then we find that the reason Yeshua chose that particular place is because I call it a no man's land. There was, in that particular wilderness, there was no nation that owned it. Nobody. It was where it was like a highway, an interstate from Europe, from Africa, from Asia, and it was the highway of the kings. They would take those caravans of camels, sometimes 200-300 of them, and they would bring spices and coal. Egypt does not have coal. And they would bring coal and all the stuff. So they would take it to Egypt, who is the door of Africa, and then they would take it back to Europe, what they needed. But there was no country, there was no language spoken there. It was a remote place of desert and mountains. Why? Because Yeshua did not want any one nation to get the credit for the oracles of God. He wanted only Israel and the mixed multitude to come and be the witness to the coming of Yeshua. The mountain was quaking, and pitch darkness came upon the mountain with lightning and heavenly shofarim. What does the shofar represent in the days of Solomon's temple? It's to announce the assembly, to announce that you need to come, elevate, is what is make aliyah. Make an aliyah to the temple, and then Yeshua will come down. So this is where they meet. This is the meeting place. This is God's house, who invites you to come in his house in his day of Shabbat. Shabbat is not yours. The temple is not yours. It's all for Yeshua. And he is inviting us to go. Well, the appointed place was the tabernacle. And in later years, it became the temple in Jerusalem. The appointed times are the biblical festivals and a weekly Shabbat. So, which one would you say is the greatest of all of God's holy days? You have Passover, you have Shavuot, the giving of the Torah, you have the Sukkot, and then you have Shabbat. Which one do you think is the greatest of them all? Shabbat. Because all the other ones are a single day, or the first and the last day, like in the Pesach and Sukkot. And look, the giving of the Torah is only one day. Only one day. Each one of the other ones were 7. But only of the giving of the Torah is one day. But Shabbat is 52 times a year. Every time you go like this, time to assemble. Shafarim, time to assemble. God is calling. Our Heavenly Father wants to embrace us. He wants to come down. He wants to wake us up from the slumber of sin and the world events. I love Shabbat. Not only because when I was working very, very hard through the week, and I was with anticipation, I don't have to go to work tomorrow. What a blessing of just relaxing and enjoying a meal with brothers and sisters. 52 times a year, Shabbat is a memorial. Sukkot is memorial. Pesach is memorial. Shavuot is memorial. But Shabbat, 52 times God wants to remind us. If you get well, if you do this right, soon I'm coming back for 1,000 years with you. And then after that, we're going to go home to my Father and his home. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.